I licked the keypad at the ATM to clean it for the next person, and I caught 3 different strains of the flu. It wasn't a slow burn kind of sick. It was a freight train. One minute I was congratulating myself on my public service. The next I was laid out on my couch, convinced my bones had been replaced with chalk, and my skin was just a loose bag to hold the fever in. The world outside my apartment window, a gritty slice of downtown, faded into a blurry, indifferent gray. My entire existence shrank to the distance between my pillow and the half-empty glass of water on the floor. Every blink was an effort. Every thought was a fuzzy, disconnected mess, usually circling back to the metallic, surprisingly salty taste of the number 5. Then my phone buzzed, a violent tremor against the floorboards. I groaned, rolling over and fumbling for it. The screen lit up with a picture of my sister, Chloe. Her smile so bright it physically hurt my eyes. I swiped to answer, and her voice, pure sunshine and excitement, flooded my ear. "Alex, are you ready? Can you believe it's only 3 days away? I'm freaking out, but like the good kind of freaking out. Mark and I just finalized the seating chart, and I swear, putting Aunt Carol next to his cousin from Boston is either genius or a declaration of war." She laughed, a sound that normally made me feel grounded, but today it just echoed in the vast, empty cavern of my head. I tried to form a word, something congratulatory and normal, but all that came out was a low, guttural croak, like a toad being stepped on. There was a pause on her end. "Whoa, you sound awful. Are you okay?" And that's when the panic, colder and sharper than any fever chill, sliced through the fog. The wedding. Her wedding. This Saturday. I wasn't just a guest who could send a nice card and a blender. I was the man of honor. I was giving the speech. I was the one who was supposed to make sure her veil was straight and hold her bouquet and tell her she wasn't making the biggest mistake of her life, even as a joke. This wasn't just bad timing, it was a cosmic joke where I was the punchline, a self-inflicted wound born from a moment of spectacular, germ-riddled stupidity. I remembered the promise we made when we were kids, sitting in the half-finished treehouse my dad gave up on. She was crying over some scraped knee, and I, the worldly 10-year-old, told her that big brothers were supposed to protect their little sisters from all the bad stuff. "I'll always be there for the big things, Chloe," I'd said, puffing out my chest. "Always." We'd pinky sworn it. Now, one of the biggest things in her life was about to happen, and I was going to be quarantined by my own idiocy, a biohazard in a cheap suit. I was about to break the oldest and most important promise I'd ever made. My eyes landed on the note cards on my coffee table, the speech I'd spent weeks agonizing over. I'd practiced it in the mirror until I didn't sound like a robot, until the jokes landed and the sentimental parts didn't make me choke up. I reached for them, my hand shaking. I tried to read the first line aloud. "For those of you who don't know me," the words caught in my throat, dissolving into a hacking cough that sent daggers of pain through my chest. I fell back against the cushions, defeated. The speech was about how Chloe had always been the one to pull me back to reality, to make sense of my tangled thoughts. The irony was so thick, I could taste it. No, I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't call her and tell her that her weirdo brother, the one she defended and loved unconditionally her whole life, had incapacitated himself by licking public property. It was too pathetic. Too me. Lying here, marinating in my own failure wasn't an option. There had to be a way. A shortcut. A miracle cure that didn't involve doctors and prescriptions and waiting. My brain, sputtering and misfiring, turned to the one place all desperate people go for terrible advice: the internet. My fingers, slick with sweat, typed "how to cure flu in 24 hours" into my phone's search bar. I scrolled past the sensible advice, rest, fluids, see a doctor, and dove deep into the strange, murky waters of home remedies and wellness blogs. I found what I was looking for on page 7 of the search results, a post with a title that screamed legitimacy: "Annihilate any virus with this ancient fire tonic." The recipe was an unholy concoction of raw garlic, grated ginger, a terrifying amount of cayenne pepper, and something called live culture pickle brain. It promised to scour the sickness from your very cells. It sounded disgusting. It sounded dangerous. It was perfect. I dragged myself into the kitchen, a grim determination setting in. I pulled the ingredients from my fridge and pantry, my movements slow and clumsy. The reek of garlic filled my small apartment as I crushed the cloves with the flat of a knife. I grated the ginger until my knuckles were raw, dumped in enough cayenne to make my eyes water, and poured in the cloudy green brine. I stood there for a moment, swaying, staring at the swirling, pungent sludge in the glass. My reflection in the microwave door was a pale, sweaty ghost. A failure, a brother who was about to let his sister down on the most important day of her life. I raised the glass, the smell burning my nostrils. It didn't matter. For Chloe, I'd do anything. I took a breath, pinched my nose, and threw the whole thing back. For a split second, there was nothing, just the gritty texture of ginger and garlic. Then the cayenne hit the back of my throat like a lit match. It wasn't just heat, it was a chemical fire, a wave of pure agony that clawed its way down my esophagus and detonated in my stomach. My eyes burst into tears. A strangled, hiccuping gasp escaped my lips as I doubled over the sink, my body trying to decide whether to reject the potion violently or simply shut down. The fire tonic did not, as promised, scour the sickness from my cells. It just declared war on them, a scorched earth campaign that left me weaker and more nauseous than before. The flu now had an accomplice. The next 36 hours were a fever dream of misery. I drifted in and out of a sweaty, restless sleep, haunted by visions of dancing garlic cloves and laughing ATM keypads. The wedding was no longer a date on the calendar, it was a deadline, a final exam for which I hadn't just failed to study, I'd actively eaten the textbook. Every time my phone buzzed with a text from Chloe, a picture of her dress, a question about the processional music, a fresh wave of shame washed over me. I was a ghost at her feast, a specter of brotherly failure. Finally, with less than a day to go, curled in a ball of defeat on my bathroom floor, I knew I couldn't hide anymore. I had to make the call. My thumb hovered over her contact photo, my heart hammering against my ribs. I pressed the button. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with pre-wedding jitters. "Hey, everything okay?" I took a shaky breath. "Chloe," I croaked, my voice a raw whisper. "I can't come." The silence on the other end was heavy, absolute. I could feel her confusion, the hurt already forming. I forced the rest out in a single mortifying rush. "I'm really, really sick. I have the flu. And I got it because I did something incredibly stupid." I told her everything. The ATM, the keypad, the misguided act of public service, the disgusting fire tonic. I waited for her to yell, to cry, to tell me how I'd ruined everything. Instead, after a long moment, I heard a sound, a small, choked snort, which turned into a giggle, which blossomed into a full, rolling laugh. She was laughing. You licked it?" She finally managed to get out between peals of laughter. "Oh my God, Alex. Of course you did. That is the most you thing you have ever done." There was no anger in her voice, only a deep, familiar, sisterly exasperation, mixed with something that sounded a lot like love. "Okay, you absolute moron," she said, her tone shifting into problem-solving mode. "Here's what we're going to do." The plan was simple, and it was brilliant. On the day of the wedding, I sat propped up on my couch, wrapped in every blanket I owned, staring at my laptop. Our cousin Ben had set it up on a chair at the front of the venue. Through the tinny speakers, I heard the music swell. I watched my little sister, the one I'd pinky sworn to protect, walk down the aisle looking like something out of a dream. I saw the look on Mark's face when he saw her, and even through a pixelated video feed, it was enough to make my throat ache. Later, at the reception, Ben placed the laptop on a podium facing the crowd. Chloe's face appeared on my screen, smiling at me, giving me a little nod. I cleared my throat, the note cards trembling in my hand. "For those of you who don't know me," I began, my voice raspy but clear, "I'm Alex, Chloe's brother, and as you can probably tell, I'm not exactly where I'm supposed to be." A ripple of laughter went through the room. "I'm currently under a self-imposed quarantine after a spectacularly bad decision involving an ATM. But I learned something this week. I learned that a promise isn't about being there in person. It's about showing up, no matter how you have to do it." I looked at my sister's face on the screen, her eyes shining with tears, and I delivered the rest of my speech, not to the room, but directly to her. I kept my promise. It just cost me 3 strains of the flu and any last shred of my dignity. What's the most ridiculous thing you've ever done out of love for someone else? Let us know in the comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. I post new stories every day.